Okay, yeah, so good morning, everyone. And my name is Professor Champolosu. And today I introduce you to how to write a research proposal. So without wasting too much time, I'll share my screen and I'll begin what this session is all about. Okay, yeah, so our title, for today, like I said earlier on, is how to write a research proposal. And this is Professor Champolosu from the OMIS department, University of Ghana Business School. So my contacts are there. If you want me, you can, send me email mostly. Okay, so first, before we talk about the proposal, we must understand what we mean by a research. So by definition, we say a research is just an organized, systematic, database, critical, scientific inquiry or investigation into a specific problem undertaken with the objective of finding answers or solutions, to it. So all that the long sentence that you see over there means anytime we talk about research, it's something that should be organized. So if you just go to Google and then you type some phrase and you search for that one, we don't see that one as a research. That one you are just searching for, information. But if we say you are embarking on a research, then mostly there's a structure, and that's why we are saying it should be first, organized, and secondly, it follows some kind of what systematic approach. And it says it's a database critical scientific inquiry. So definitely, it will involve collecting of data, analyzing of the data, and so on and so forth. And that's why we use the term database critical scientific inquiry or investigation into a problem. So mostly we don't just research. There's a phenomenon and we want to understand or we want to explain what is happening. And that's why we do that investigation into the specific problem. And they say we undertake that one with the objective of finding answers or solutions, to it. So mostly every research that we do, there should be an outcome. And why do we need the outcome? So the outcome here, we are saying it gives us contributions to existing body of knowledge. So most of the research that we do is about generating knowledge, and that knowledge can be used for so many things. So when it comes to the society, the knowledge can be applied when it comes to organizations, individual level, government level, nations, and so on and so forth. And that's why we do, research. The second point is all information that enables managers to make decisions to rectify, problems. And just like I said, so the outcome after generating the body of knowledge will also give us a lot of insights that can help, managers, policymakers, and so on and so forth. So in terms of most of the research that we do, definitely we need some kind of, data. And it's the data that will let us know when we analyze it, what this phenomenon, is all about. So the data can come as a primary one. So primary data is the one that usually you have to now go to the field. Sometimes we interview people. Sometimes we do what we call focus group discussions, or sometimes we do a survey whereby we give questionnaires for people to, fill. So those ones, usually we term them the primary data. There's some of them that we also say they are secondary. Secondary in the sense that the data is already there. So Bank of Ghana, World Bank, IMF, UNICEF, World Health Organization, and several other, governmental agencies worldwide generate their own data. And sometimes we can also go in and then, extract data from those, databases and also use those ones for our investigation. So we want to know the trend of inflation of Ghana from, let's say, the year 2010 up to the year 2025. Then the secondary data can help us because the data is already there from maybe Bank of Ghana or Statistical Service or IMF or World Bank and so on and so forth. And sometimes with the data that we collect can come in the form of quantities, and that's where the quantitative, come in. So here we are dealing with, numbers, and the data can be textual, and that's where the qualitative come in. So here we are dealing with, text. So you must understand all these fundamentals when we talk about researching. The next thing is about purposiveness. So any research at all that you are doing, there should be what a definite aim and what purpose. So why am I embarking on this particular research? Students are failing. Why are they failing? Is it because they have been given or they are now using most of the time their time on social media, or games or, whatever. And because of that, they are not, learning. So we can embark on such a research for us to identify why the performance of students are going down. And that's kind of the purposiveness thing that we are talking about. So every research that we are embarking upon, there's always the aim and then, the purpose. And there's also what we call a rigor. So regarding the rigor, we don't just, go to the field and do anything. There should always be what we call a theoretical base. So anything at all that happens around us in this world, there's a theoretical foundation that can explain those phenomena. So here the rigor says a good theoretical base and a sound methodological design is also involved when we embark on research. And that's why the first point we say is an organized, systematic kind of. So it's not just me going to Google and typing for searching for some information. We don't see that one as what research. And that's why the rigor says it's a good theoretical base and a sound methodological design. The next one we say is testability. So depending on the phenomenon that we are investigating, sometimes we will make assumptions. So we can maybe propositions or hypotheses, and then we have to test and see whether our hypotheses are supported or not. And that's why I say testability. It lends itself to testing logically developed, hypothesis. Then the next one is replicability. So replicability is very, very important. Can we replicate these results that we have found here? So a study was done, let's say, at University of Ghana to see students' academic performance, the example I give. Can we replicate the same thing at UPSC, the same thing at Ashesi, the same thing at Wisconsin, the same thing at KNUST, and so on and so forth? So most of the time, we can even look at it from country context. This study was done in the West, let's say UK, Canada, US. Can we do the same thing in Ghana, Nigeria, and see if the results will be the same? And that's why I say research results supported when research is repeated in other similar, circumstances. The last one here talks about precision and confidence. So here it says closeness of findings to reality and probability that estimations are correct, respectively. So sometimes there are some research that we assume that this thing that is happening, this is the these are what we perceive to be the solution or the answer. But we need to go through the whole scientific inquiry and see if indeed what we were thinking about is the same thing that is happening or not. And that's what the last point here is talking about. Then we also talk about objectivity. So the objectivity here says most of the conclusion that we are drawing should be based on facts, factual, not, people's own perceptions or, people's own intuition and the rest. So it says the conclusions drawn are based on facts resulting from what the actual, data. So you cannot just assume that, oh, this thing is because of A, B, C, D. Yes, it could be that students are not learning. That's why the academic performance is low. But why are they learning? We have to now go deeper and find out why they are not learning. What is, drawing their attention towards them attending lectures and then doing their assignments and writing the exams and so on and so forth. So it should be based on some facts. And that's why I'm saying the conclusions drawn here are based on facts resulting from what the actual data. We need to survey them. We need to interview them and find out why perhaps they are not learning and that is affecting their academic performance. Then generalizability is also very, very important. So the results that we get, if we studied only University of Ghana students, can we generalize it to all students in Ghana? No. So the findings that we find in University of Ghana may not be the same thing if you go to Ashesi, may not be the same if you go to KNUST and so on and so forth. So generalizability means the findings should be generalized among the population. So if you are talking about the entire higher educational, students in Ghana, then we have to collect data from several of them. And later we are going to talk about sampling and all that for you to understand these things better. So say the scope of applicability of the research findings in one settings to other settings. So if we do only University of Ghana among Ghanaian university students, then we say it's a case study of only University of Ghana. In that case, we cannot generalize it. But if we study, there are several universities of Ghana, but we get students from all of them. We can't do all, but substantial sample size from them. Then that one we can generalize and we say, yes, this is the context of university students in Ghana. So generalizability is also very, very important. And the last one is parsimony. So you see, it's simple in explaining the phenomena or problem that occur and the application of solutions to problems. In other words, when we are interpreting our findings, we have to make it so simple and then something that everybody will understand, not to make it so complex and the rest. And that's the concept of the parsimony. So this is just a brief introduction regarding what research is all about. Having said this, then we move to how we write the research proposal, itself. And if you recall, I've already given you, a template that will help you to write the research proposal. So most of the things we are going to discuss is now going to be based on the template that, I give you already. Okay, yeah, so the proposal is just a direction of your research endeavor. In other words, it's the summary of the entire thesis or long essay or project paper. And the outline of the proposal is, as below. And this is kind of the template I gave to you, last time. So in your chapter one, first we look at here, the preliminary pages are not, added. We focus on the chapter, but you have been given the preliminary pages together with the template given. So you can know how you go about it. And I explained that earlier on. So chapter one, you look at your introduction, and then we also look at the background of the study. But in the Legon context, chapter one is up, introduction is below it, then background of the study is where we focus on. So under the introduction, we don't write, anything there. Other jurisdiction, they will write something under introduction and also come to the background of the study. But here we don't do that. Then we move to the research problem. Problem statement, usually we don't want it. So research problem. Then research purpose, research objectives, research questions, significance of the study, and then limitation of the study. So usually this is the chapter one, but mostly after we are done with the long essay or thesis, the limitations is moved from chapter one and we move that one to the final chapter. So usually limitation will not be under chapter one, but the proposal stage, sometimes we can add the limitation of the study. Then chapter two, we look at the literature review, and then here we define concepts. So concept definition, etc., related studies, underpinning theory or theories, research or conceptual framework model, definition of variables or key terms, hypothesis development, and so on and so forth. All this, we are going to go through all this, one by one. So I'm just reading them now. Then chapter three, we look at the research methodology or the research design, sampling techniques, data collection techniques, data analysis techniques, and so on and so forth. So these are what we're giving to you. Mostly when you are writing a research proposal, you should capture these three, chapters for us to see what your proposal is all about. So now we take them one by one. We look at the first one, which is the introduction. And like I said, in some universities, you have to write the introduction before the background of the study. But in the Legon contest, the two of them, we don't write anything under introduction. Everything will rather come under the background of the study. So when you are writing yours, you can ignore whatever we are saying here. Those things can still come under the background of the study. So here we are saying the introduction is a very general explanation about the topic that you choose for your, thesis or your long essay or project work. So it depends. You decide, a topic, and what is the general explanation about that topic that, you have decided to embark upon. So here we are saying several paragraphs are involved here, depending on the phenomenon that you are being investigated. You are investigating. In other words, I cannot tell you that write 2 paragraph, 3, 4. It depends on what your, phenomenon is all about. That will determine the number of, paragraphs you need to write. And here you talk about the importance of this topic in current, days. So what is trending with this particular, topic that you have, chosen? So if it's something about mobile, money, if it's something about, let's say, application of AI in healthcare, if it's something about whatever, you have to now let us know how important that particular topic is in terms of society, in terms of individuals, in terms of organization, in terms of the government, and so on and so forth. Then you move to the background of the study. So like I said earlier on, the Legon contest, we look at this one, more. So if anything, you can combine the introduction one I described with the background, is the same thing. So say the background of the study is preamble or introduction about the research, problem. So what problem that you are going to address not in the research problem itself, but here you can give a brief, just about it. And that's why I'm saying it's a preamble or introduction about the research problem. So it is about the general feelings about one specific issue and, the study. And if you want to write the background of the study, you consider why it is important to highlight, this issue. So what is really trending regarding this, problem or this issue that is there? And here you say is to portray the importance of the phenomenon of what, interest. So you know the title or the topic that you want to, investigate, why you want to do all those things, and the rest you have to now outline them within the background of the study. Say what are the symptoms? If it exists, therefore the problem may exist. You know, and you have observed, and also the literature is talking about it. So why is it so? Why is it that so many people, if it comes to the mobile money space, a lot of people through, what they call social engineering, I dupe every day. How can you investigate such a phenomenon? And why is it that in spite of the radio adverts, in spite of the TV adverts, and so on and so forth, still people fall prey to it and they are hacked and people are, they are able to, trick them and get their money and all those things. You can investigate into such a phenomenon. And that's why I say if it exists, therefore the problem may exist. After the background of the study, okay, it's a continuation here. So you say generally this section requires information and it could be statistics, it could be statements or gaps in the previous studies concerned by, somebody, which could be from professionals, industries, or government. So sometimes there could be a statistics coming from an organization regarding the phenomenon that you are investigating. Several children are having this, and the statistics says, the data says, or a lot of people are duped when it comes to mobile, money platforms. That still says in this quarter or this, all those things. That's why I say generally you can include those, statistics that are already there. So you need to state the background of the study clearly and concisely within 5 to 6 paragraphs, but it depends. That's it. Mostly it depends on what the phenomenon that you are, investigating. So some people, their phenomenon may be something that is trending locally, globally, and so on and so forth. So they can write more with a lot of statistics to back it. Some you may not get it that way. So it depends on the phenomenon that you are investigating. But let us know what is happening globally, what is happening nationally, and what is happening, locally. If it depends on if it's a case study about an organization that you are doing. Then after that one, the next thing that we talk about is the research problem and the research gaps. And in most of the time, when it comes to basic research or this thesis, long essays, and the rest, we identify a lot of the gaps. That is what we address. They say the research problem or the problem statement is about what needs to be solved, and the gaps are what have not been studied. And like I said, most of the time, our focus is not about solving specific problems in organizations or at the national societal level per se, but we look at what are the gaps in the literature that have not been addressed. So you identify the sources of the problem, whether it comes from your own experience and observation or others' experiences and observation. For instance, I did a study with some colleagues some years back, and it was my own observation. I realized I drive around and you see people are driving and they are fidgeting their phones. You see people are driving and they are making calls. You see people even on motorbikes and they are making calls and now testing on motorbikes and the rest. And based on that observation, then I started the research problem and then we investigated and it was, published. So we look at what the laws are saying. In spite of the DVLA, the Ghana, what the act, I've forgotten, what is it saying? The rule, whatever, I've forgotten them. The laws are there and it's against people driving and making calls and the rest. The technology is there. Why are we not using it? We can use the hands-free. We can use our, phone speakers and the rest. But still, you see people, the phone is on their, ears and they are making calls whilst they are cruising. It's against the law, but it's a common phenomenon. And that's why we're saying you can identify the sources of the problem, whether it comes from your own experience and observation or others' experiences and observations. Is the situation that causes the researcher to feel apprehensive, confused, or interested to need to know, more. So I realized, the laws are there. We all know that we shouldn't drive and make calls. We shouldn't, even not now, it's not only driving and making calls, but riding motors and then making calls and even testing on motors. And sometimes I wonder, wow. So why is it that the laws are there, but people are flouting the laws and the rest? Then we have to investigate. So here say within 2 or 3 paragraphs, highlight the controversies or unanswered questions generally, here, and also support with literature. This is very, very important. You cannot write your research problem without supporting it with existing studies, what we term as for the literature. So you have to tell us that, oh, okay, so and so said this, so and so find out, so and so did it. This is what I'm also going to do. And that's where we say you identify the gaps, in the literature. How do you identify the gaps in the literature? The phenomenon you want to investigate, download about 10 articles of the phenomenon that you want to investigate, relevant articles, 10 of them, and go to the last part of the article before the references. Usually they would write limitations and future research directions or limitations and suggestions for future research. You read all of them. By the time you finish reviewing the 10th paper, then you see, oh, in this area, this is what they have done at the global level. This is what they have done in, let's say, the sub-Saharan Africa. This is what they have done in Ghana. So in Ghana context that my work is going to be based, this is what has not been addressed. So I'm going to add that one. At the MPhil level, usually we don't accept only context. You have to talk about issue gaps and all that. But at the MBA level, usually context is enough for us. So we just accept, the context. So that's how we used to identify most of research gaps when we are investigating. After the gaps, the next thing that we go is the research goal and then the purpose and objectives. So say the goal of the study is what we call the general objective, is the general statement about the purpose of the study. And usually it should not be more than 2 or 3 sentences. So if you look at existing, long essays or thesis at the department, you see that the purpose always will let you state it direct, straightforward. So you just say the purpose of this study is to explore, is to investigate, is to determine, and that's all. We don't want you to worry too much about it. And that's why I'm saying the purpose of the study is usually no more than 2 or 3 sentences. So the purpose of the study is to explore why students or student academic performance is declining among tertiary institutions in Ghana. That's your purpose. Then you come to the objectives of the study. So objectives are specific purpose of the study and generally will guide your research hypothesis and what conceptual framework. So at both the MBA and MPhil level, 2 or 3 objectives are okay. And the reason is the more objectives you have, the more writing you are going to do, because more objectives means more data, and more data means more analysis. More analysis means more writing. So we don't usually bother you too much. So 2, 3 objectives are, okay at this, level. So this is a continuation and say the research of this should be stated in the form that can answer your research questions. For example, to identify the factors that may affect the patient satisfaction. That is one objective. To examine the relationship between demographic background and religious, commitment. That's also, an objective. To investigate, to explore, to determine, and that's how you state your objectives. So learn the keywords that are being used here and then use them as you state your purpose and then your objectives. And the next one that we move on to is your, questions. So you say these questions are specific questions about the problems that you would like to know more by solving this problem, or what are the issues you would like to know or understand or highlight. So there are 3 types of the questions, and always this red one will address it because your question should be related to your objectives anyway. You can't have objectives going one direction and then the questions going another. No, they are always linked. So take note of that. You see, the questions types could be what, how, and then why. So mostly when we talk about what, we use it for descriptive or frequency or test of difference. So mostly this could be a lot of, quantitative, studies. How, we say relationship or influence, effect, etc. So the how can be both quanti and quali, as you usually call it. And the why, mostly we look at it from the context of perhaps the qualitative. But these days, research has grown, and all of them can be used in both quantitative and qualitative. To say why we say causal relationship, experimental or correlational, not everything here that I can explain. And you have done research methods, so some of them you have to refer to your research methods class and what they say there. So you state your research questions clearly and specifically. Don't list lots of the questions at the MBA MPhil level. Maximum 1 to 3 questions are enough. And mostly, these questions should be linked to your research objectives. So if I have 3 objectives, 3 questions, 2 objectives, 2 questions. And make sure your objective that you state is the same one that you are stating for the questions. They should link, except that over there you are using the words identify, examine, investigate, explore, determine, two in front of them. But here you say what, how, why. So you link it to it. And that's why we say the research is what? Systematic, organized, systematic. So you cannot just do anything and say you are doing research. Now, the next thing we talk about is the significance of the study. So you have to let us know why important this study that you are embarking upon is important. And we say in this part, you need to explain what is your contribution from this study. So why is it important? What is it contributing? What is it bringing? So you say you spell it clearly and precisely in 4 areas. So contribution to the body of knowledge. At the MPhil level, this is very, very important. At the master's level, MBA level and the rest, sometimes we don't worry too much here. But when it comes to the PhD, that's the main thing when it comes to contribution to the body of knowledge. You say what the result of this study will add to the body of knowledge. You identify gaps and you are addressing the gaps. So what new thing are you now putting in, adding? And that's why I say, will it bridge any gap or gaps? Will it create new concept or insight or model or theory? And those ones are usually at what? The PhD level, like I said. But you at the MPhil level must still contribute to the body of knowledge. If the MBAs are not contributing too much, we don't normally care that much. Then contribution to the policy, that one everybody, whether you are PhD, MPhil, or MBAs, see how the result of study can be used in any policy making in relative organizations, companies, and industries. So the example I give, if students' performance are low and we identify it because of A, B, C, D, then policymakers in the university should now step in and bring in a lot of policies that will address the same thing. If mobile money, people are really in the mobile money space, duping a lot of people in the rest, then the regulator, that's NCA, should now come out with a lot of policies that will help regulate the mobile providers, mobile money providers, for them to set up so that this thing should reduce. Then contribution to the practice, how the result of this study can improve the practice in relative organizations, companies, and industries. So in this context, we look at it from the perspective of managers in the organization and what they should do for them to be able to address the issues that you have been identifying. So for instance, people go to a restaurant for a time and now they are stopped going. So the manager can now do some kind of scientific inquiry to find out why the customers have stopped coming. So once you are the consultant and you identify the factors or the reason they stop coming, then it's up to the manager to now address those things. And that's where the contribution to the practice comes in. So the result should tell the manager that, okay, people have stopped coming to your restaurant because these days, they come and the place is not tidy. They come and then it takes a longer time for them to be served. They come and this and that. Then the manager can now look at it and improve. Then contribution to the methodology. And this one here mostly is at the PhD level, so you don't worry much about it. So at the MPhil level, you need to contribute to the knowledge, or what we call theoretical contribution, the same thing. Contribute to the policy and also contribute to what practice. The MBAs should contribute to policy and practice, but so we let them write a letter about the knowledge as well. Then the limitations of the study, I said mostly this one will be at the end of your thesis, but the last chapter. But when you are writing a proposal, sometimes we allow it to be part of the chapter 1. So you say limitation of study is more or less about the things that limit the research to specific area. So every research has some limitations, and it's so because one study, you cannot solve the whole world problems or address the gaps in literature, all of them. They say, please don't talk about your problems and difficulties like lack of budget, time, accessibility to the data, and etc. These kind of problems are usual, and you as a researcher should predict and then know that it will okay. So that's not what you mean by the problems, but you say rather state the limitation brought about by the procedure and framework of the study. The next slide will give you examples. So examples here are this study was limited to only some selected variables which were anticipated to relate to job satisfaction. In other words, there are several variables, tens and hundreds of variables that we can study. But your study focus on some, of them. So you are saying other studies can now go and also look at the other variables. That is what we mean by a limitation. Only a part of the theory of work adjustment was adopted and adapted to provide a theoretical foundation of the study. So here too, you see that you did not use the entire theory. So you use a part of the theory. And that's why we're saying those are what we see as limitations. The last one says, this study was confined to only 2 fully residential and 2 non-residential government schools. The findings are unique to these 4 schools only and cannot be generalized to other government secondary schools. So you see that the examples I gave earlier on that if you do a study about University of Ghana alone, it cannot be generalized. It's the University of Ghana context. So you can say your study was limited to only students from University of Ghana. Other studies can now do a survey of the entire Ghana students and so on and so forth. So that's what we mean by limitations and not your problems or time constraint and those things. So that ends the chapter 1. Now we move to the chapter 2, which is the literature review. And here we say the literature review is the main body of the proposal. Usually about 5 to 7 pages is enough, but it depends on the phenomenon. So most of the time, if we give those kind of number of pages and the rest, don't go and say, oh, I'm focusing on those pages. It depends on what you are investigating. So you need to explain the theory or model your study is based on. So one thing that is very, very important, especially for the MPhils, is you need a theory. For the MBAs, sometimes theory may not be that important to us, but as for you, your level, you always need a theory. So to write your literature review, you consider 4 main different parts. So the first part is what we call the concepts. So you talk about the phenomenon being discussed and you state the definitions of the phenomenon. If it's about mobile money, you have to define what is it, what applications are there regarding mobile money, what are the benefits with mobile money, what are the drawbacks with mobile money. And that's why I say state the definitions, applications, benefits, drawbacks, etc. of the phenomenon that is being discussed. Then at the MPhil level, sometimes we let you divide the theory into another chapter. But at the MBA level, sometimes we let them combine. So it all depends on your supervisor and how you want to structure it. After the concept, the next thing that you talk about, the theoretical, foundation, what theory is underpinning the work. So say part B is about the theory. In this part, you need to bring at least one theory or model related to the topic of your study. We said at least one, which means you can have 2, you can have 3, you can have 4, and so on and so on. So at the MPhil level, 1, 2 is okay. But at the PhD level, the more theories you have, the better your work. It doesn't mean you can't use only one theory. You can. So say combination of theories are always the best and should be done if possible, and usually at the MPhil and what PhD levels. In other words, what the theories say about the topic under study. So if people are really enjoying mobile money, why are they enjoying mobile money? Then you see that, oh, okay, technology acceptance model could be in the ease of use and the perceived usefulness in making their life comfortable, convenient, and all that. So you have to say, okay, it's based on that particular theory. Or you can go with the UT, Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology. I know Prof. Watson has done theories and methods with you, so these things shouldn't be a problem at all. So theories are very, very important to explain every phenomenon that you are investigating. Then the next one, we talk about the previous research, and this is very, very important because how do you write your research problem? How do you identify the gaps? All of them is based on what others have done, and that's the part C. So in this part, you need to bring as much as you can the result of previous study conducted in the same topic or similar topics. In other words, what the other studies say about the topic that you are, studying. So mostly we prefer at the MPhil level that here you put a table. So you can have a table with about 5 columns. So the first column can be the study itself. Then the second column can be the purpose or objective or aims of that particular study. The third column can be if there was any theory underpinning the study. The fourth column can be what we call the context. Context here is the geographic context. And the last, column can be about the findings. So that's how we go about with the previous study research. The moment you are able to identify, let's say, 10 relevant, research in your area, and then you put it in the table that I just described, then you see that you'll be able to identify the gaps in the literature and where the studies have been made and all those, kind of things, and the findings and everything. So previous research is also very, very important. And the next thing, okay, here is talking about the theoretical, framework. So we just talk about the part B being, the theories. So we say the theoretical framework depicts all the theories underpinning the study. And you cannot do MPhil and you tell me you don't have any underpinning theory. I'm not bringing the paradigms and philosophies and those things here. But depending on the philosophy or paradigm you belong, yes, some paradigms or philosophies will say, okay, you can go without a theory. But other paradigms and philosophies, you need a theory. I'm not bringing those ones here. So let's move on. Once you have the theoretical framework which depicts all the theories that is underpinning the work, then you can derive your conceptual framework from the theoretical framework. So the conceptual framework is usually derived from the theories and previous research that the literature, review. So if I'm using the technology acceptance model as one of my theories, what are the constructs or the factors or the variables in technology acceptance model? Can those factors or constructs help me resolve or investigate the phenomenon I'm investigating? Then yes, I can adapt the technology acceptance model and the constructs there. That could be my conceptual, framework. And the conceptual framework mostly can be represented as a schematic diagram. So you see that we draw it. And once I look at it, I know that, okay, so these are the factors influencing this and so on and so forth. Others will also do it in what we call mathematical equation. So you see it can be represented as a schematic diagram or mathematical equation that helps to postulate and test certain relationship between what? The variables. The conceptual framework is for better understanding of the dynamics of the situation. So mostly your conceptual framework is very, very, very important and you shouldn't joke with it. First, you start with your theoretical framework, which is all the theories underpinning the work. And here you talk about the theories and what works the theories, who propounded the theories and what studies they have used for the theories. You talk about them here. Then afterwards, you come to your conceptual framework and you derive the variables or constructs from here, and then you continue on, as we say. So the components of the conceptual framework are as below. It identifies and labels the important variables in the situation that are relevant to the problem. There could be several of the factors or variables or constructs within the theory, but not all of them are important or relevant to whatever you are doing. So you don't just take the entire theory and put it there. No, you derive the most relevant or important one. And sometimes we even say add others to it, and that's where you are contributing to what the theory. So that will show the relationship of what the variables and so on and so forth. So how and why moderating and intervening or mediating control variables are treated. This one is done at the PhD level most of the time, so don't worry much about what is here. There are different types of variables that are out there, what we call moderating, what we call intervening or mediating, and so on and so forth. But now let's take then the schematic diagram of the conceptual model help to visualize the theorized, relationship. So once you're able to come out with your own conceptual framework and you draw it, then at a glance, I know that, okay, this is what this study is all about. And the conceptual framework is based on your research problem and the objectives or questions that you set forth, to address. Then we know what the study is all about. The next thing that we talk about is once you have your constructs with the factors or the conceptual framework with the factors or variables derived, then you need to now, explain, them, define those variables or key terms. So they say you need to define all variables and key terms either theoretically or practically. So in terms of theoretical, you say what the literature say about that variables or key terms. In other words, if you are using perceived usefulness, what's the meaning of perceived usefulness from the literature? If you say perceived use of use, what is the meaning of perceived use of use? If you say that will lead to acceptance of the technology, what's the meaning of acceptance of the technology? You have to tell us all these things, and all of them, you support them with literature. And that's why I'm saying you may bring one more comprehensive definition from other scholars, but don't forget to put its references, because everything at all that you are doing when it comes to scientific inquiry is about what people have done. That's why you are using, and it's a systematic way organized. So you cannot just write anything on your own. You have to back them with a lot of literature. Practically, what exactly do you mean by this variable or key terms in your study? You need to write your own definition, especially in your study, but it's not a preferred choice. You are not a grounded scholar, so you can't define things. You have to always look at what is in the literature and use that one to support, whatever you are doing. Then the next thing is about once you have your conceptual framework, you've established the relationships and everything, then you talk about your research hypothesis. So hypothesis is just a tentative proposition or statement of the researcher's expectations relative to a relationship between variables within the problem. So more or less, it's just an assumption that you are doing that, oh, okay, people prefer using iPhone because iPhone is durable. iPhone is what do you call it? Easy to use. iPhone is this, iPhone is that, and that is what we mean by you are now establishing the relationships, and you have to now make those proposition or statements that you think is leading to people using the technology and so on and so forth. So when you develop hypotheses, you consider they should be based on your research questions, and your research questions and problem are all related to what the conceptual framework. It should also be presented only as a suggested solution to a problem or as an explanation of what a phenomenon. So it's an assumption that you are making. It's not the right answer. And that's why when we finish, we test with the analysis and it's either accepted or rejected. They say, note, however, that if you are doing a qualitative study, instead of hypothesis, rather state propositions, is the same thing. So if I'm doing quantitative, we call it hypothesis. If I'm doing qualitative, we call it propositions, and it's almost the same thing. So now these are how we, state them. So the actual hypothesis, we call them H1, A2, A3. So we say hypothesis developed from observation, the related literature, and or the theory may be stated in a bidirectional or non-directional form. And that's what you mean by the research hypothesis H1, A2, A3. So bidirectional means it can be in two modes, or non-directional means there's no direction regarding it. Some examples will come and you see. And sometimes we use the word positive or negative, looking at the relationship, type. For instance, if you use diffusion of innovations theory, that one is having five, constructs. So we have a construct that we call relative advantage. We have a construct that we call complexity, compatibility, trialability, and then observability. All the four are seen as positive, but complexity, we see that one as negative because how complex the system is will deter people from using it. So usually we state that one as a negative one. Sometimes we don't use any negative or positive. It's still acceptable, but you can decide to go by that. You can say there's a positive relationship between relative advantage and the use of the technology. There's a negative relationship between complexity and the use of the technology. There's a positive relationship between compatibility and the use of the technology. There's a positive relationship between trialability and the use of the technology, and there's a positive relationship between observability and the technology. So it depends on what the construct is saying, and you state your hypothesis. No hypothesis, we don't state them, but we have it at the back of our mind. So the null hypothesis of H1, we will say is H0. We say where the statistical tests are to be performed, the research hypothesis must be translated into the null hypothesis. But usually we don't state this one. We go ahead and state the one here. So the negation of the null one, the negation of the main one becomes the null hypothesis, and it's simple and straightforward. They say, note, you are not allowed to use null hypothesis in your proposal or thesis. Null hypothesis only for testing the research hypothesis. So these are examples of the, hypothesis as, I said, earlier on. So this one here, says there's a positive relationship between school organizational climate and teachers' job satisfaction. Forget about the one tail, the two tails, and those things. And those are for statistical kind of thing. So what is it saying? There are two contrasts here. So school organizational climate and what? Teachers' job satisfaction. So if the school organizational climate is not good, then it means it will affect what teachers. Because they come to work and they may not be happy. They come to work and because of the way the environment is and the rest, it can affect their performance. And that's how we state a hypothesis. Another one says students who are encouraged to write comments about tests on their answer sheets will make higher test scores than students who have no opportunity to make comments. So here you see that it's about students who can, write comments on their test scores against those who cannot. And they are saying if students are allowed to write comments on their test, answer sheets, then they can do more than those who are not allowed to do that. That's somebody's assumption, and we can test and see if it's true or not true. Also, the hypothesis may be accepted or rejected. The last one says there's a significant difference or relationship in teachers' job satisfaction between fully residential and non-residential schools. And the reason I say forget about the 1T, 2T is here you see that one variable, that is teachers' job satisfaction, is now being tested against fully residential places and non-residential, schools. And that's why I see that one as, two tails. So two variables are involved, but one teachers' job satisfaction is being tested against those ones. But usually, these are advanced forms that when we are doing statistics, we talk more about them. So these are examples of how we state, hypothesis. Now, these are also examples about the null hypothesis, but that one we don't, state them. So you see, anytime we have this one, the H1 will be there is significant relationship between stress, experience on the job, and satisfaction of employees. If we want it to be the null one, then we just put the word no. And that's why I say there is no significant, then it becomes the null hypothesis. Another one says there is no significant difference between gender and job satisfaction. So if you move the no there, then it could be there is significant differences between gender and job satisfaction. That's the H1 normal hypothesis. The null one, we just negate it. And that's why I say there is no significant difference between gender and job satisfaction. There's a note for each research question that you stated in previous section, you may have one or more than one hypothesis. It depends. So don't list laws of hypothesis. For MBA level, maximum 3 to 5 is what enough. But it depends on the research, questions that you have. So the research question that you have will determine, and the conceptual framework that you draw will determine this ones. So now we are moving to the chapter 3. So chapter 3 talk about research design. And what is the research design? So you see, the research design is about the way that you want to conduct your research. In other words, it is the ways in which research studies are designed and the procedures by which data are collected and analyzed. So it's kind of a framework that is guiding how the research is to be conducted. So to write this part of proposal, consider the following. Before we go with the research design, there's something that we need to look at. So first, we must know the different types of research that are out there. So we have what they call the applied research and the basic research. So the applied research, we see the research which is done with the intention of applying the results of its finding to solving specific problems currently being experienced in the organization. So here, there are real world problems that you have identified in the organization and you want to really address them. Then we go with what we call the applied research. The basic research is where our focus is. And it says the research done with the intention to generate more knowledge and understanding of the phenomenon that occur and to build theories based on the research results. So most of the research that we do as academics mostly is based on the basic research. But whether applied or basic research, all of them follow the same kind of structure. They say although both types of research follow the same steps of systematic inquiry to arrive at solutions to problems, you need to declare the type of your research. Basic research is mostly preferred at the MBA, MPhil, and PhD level. So here most of the time we do this kind. And that's why sometimes people will say, but people have done a lot of projects, long essays and the rest, and they are left on the shelf to rot and all that. It's because we are generating knowledge. And that knowledge is supposed to be used by industry people, supposed to be used by government, is supposed to be used by society, policymakers, and the rest. So if they are not using that knowledge, there's nothing anyone can do. We are not necessarily solving, this kind of applied research kind of thing. Unless maybe those in engineering and the rest that focus on specific problem and then trying to solve them and so on and so forth. So once you determine the type of your research, you need to now determine the purpose of your study as well. And the purpose can be mostly, there are two types of the purpose that we look at. So the purpose, first one can be what they call explanatory. And as the name implies, the explanatory attempts to explain the reasons for the phenomenon that the descriptive study only observe. So we want to explain why students' performance are going down. That could be explanatory. So the researcher uses theories or at least hypotheses to account for the forces that cause a certain phenomenon to occur. So in this case, we know the problem, and the problem we have identified is students' performance are going low. For the past 5 years, that have been the trend. So we want to explain why students' performance have been going low. If we don't know the problem, then most of the time that's where we do exploratory. So you say it attempts to explore a phenomenon in which much is not known about and why things are the way they are in that domain. So in instances whereby it's a new area emerging and you don't know much about the phenomenon, then mostly we have to explore. And some people just do the readiness. So for instance, we want to introduce this AI in a primary school in a small community. We don't know. Do they even have the computers? Do they have reliable internet? Do they have capacity? People who understand even technology and the rest. So in that case, we have to do the readiness, and that's where we explore, because we don't know whether it will work there or it will not work there. So you should understand the phenomenon you are investigating and whether it's the explanatory part or the exploratory part. There are instances that you can combine the two as well. There are several other ways that are there, but I just put these two for you. They say you may choose one or more purpose, but make sure about the one that you are choosing. Then we now look at the research method. So there are two main ways when it comes to the research that we do. And the first one is the qualitative approach. So here it affords the researcher rich insights and understanding of the situation or the target public. So information may not be generalizable. And the reason why qualitative research information may not be generalizable is the population that you study may not be that much. So you can just interview very few students, very few lecturers, very few administrators, and then that will help explain why maybe students performance are going down. And that's why usually we don't generalize, because most of the time qualitative research are case studies most of the time. It doesn't mean all the time, most of the time. Then quantitative research, we say, is often more expensive and complicated, but it enables a greater ability to generalize to large population. So we can now come out with a survey questionnaire, and University of Ghana students are over maybe 70,000. So we can survey about 1,000 of them, 2,000 of them. Then see that result, the quantity, the number that we are getting is high. But even that is still one university that you have studied. So you cannot just go about generalizing. If you want to generalize it for the Ghanaian university students, then sample the entire universities in Ghana. And then that is what you can now say, oh, this is the case when it comes to Ghanaian, universities, when it comes to their academic performance and why it's going down. The last one is a combination of the two, and that's the mixed method. So at the MPhil level, yes, you can go by that, but mixed method can be very, very, tedious, because it's like you are doing qualitative and you are also doing quantitative. So you say combine the two outlined above, and you may start with the qualitative and validate the results of quantitative. So sometimes the qualitative will help you to identify the factors you want to study, and afterwards you do the survey. Sometimes you do the quantitative and then you validate with the qualitative. So you find the results here and you see that, why is this so? Then you can go and interview very few of them, and that will help you to substantiate your results. So it's good if you go with the mixed method approach, except that you have a lot of work to do. And that's where it may start with one approach and use the other to validate the results. So once you choose either qualitative or quantitative research method, you need to explain what is it. At least one or two, three paragraphs is needed. And you must also tell us why you think this phenomenon qualitative approach is better than quantitative, or quantitative better than qualitative, or mixed method will be the ideal. You have to let us know. So if you are going with the quantitative method, there are several, different approaches that we can, methods that we do. So if you choose quantitative method in your study, you need to explain what type of the quantitative research you want to apply as below. So you can go with what you call the survey, you can go with the content analysis, correlational, causal, comparative, experimental. All this, you can look at your research methods and then you will know. If it is qualitative too, you can go with others like the, what do you call it? Grounded theory, you can go with what we call the focus group and all those things. Those ones, I did not list them here, but you can go and then read your research methods and see that all of them are there. The quantitative people, the most common one you are going to do is the survey. So you develop the questionnaire and we do what we call cross-sectional study. So cross-sectional studies, at the time that you are doing the study, you are using, let's say, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months to collect the data. And once you collect the data, that's it. You don't go there again. And experimental is the opposite of the survey. So experimental is before and after. So students are there. You give them a certain, treatment, and then you study them for 6 months, 1 year. Afterwards, then you do your analysis and you write report about, them. And that's what the experimental, is all about. So the survey is the most common one that we do because that is straightforward. The experimental can be very, very expensive. The rest all sometimes fall under the survey or the experimental. So for each type of quantitative method that you select, at least 2 or more paragraph is needed about its definition and components. So you need to explain these things, all of them in your chapter 3. And we'll show you how you can get sample long essays for you to also see how they are done with the existing sample long essays. Aside all these things, the most important thing when it comes to every research we do is the people we are studying. If it's the secondary data, then that one, no problem. But when it comes to the surveys, the primary data, the population of interest is very, very important. So we have the population of what we term as the target population. So we say the entire group of people, events, or things of interest that the researcher wishes to what investigate. So if we are talking about University of Ghana students, even we have different levels or classes of students. So are we looking at diploma students? Are we looking at, undergraduate students? Or we are looking at postgraduate? Postgraduate, we also have classes. Are we talking about MScs? Are we talking about MAs? Are we talking about MBAs? Are we talking about MPhils? Are we talking about PhDs? So identifying the target population is very, very key in most of this research that we do. And before you choose any topic, that is the first thing that should come to your mind, that how am I going to get the data? Some people will reach everything. Then when it gets to the field, they realize, hey, the data is not there. Then they have to start afresh. And you have wasted about 1 year already. So be careful with the target population. Then once you've been able to identify your population, we have what they call element. So you say element is a single member of what? The population. So a single member of the students that you are going to investigate, each one of them, we call it what? An element. Then we also have what they call the sampling frame. So the sampling frame is a listing of all the elements in the population from which the sample is what? Drawn. So among the population, any one of them that you can select could be part of what? The sampling, frame. Then we also have the sample. And most of the time, sample and population, you can't study the entire population. Even the University of Ghana students are 70,000 and above. Can you survey all of them? It's not possible. So you have to have a way that you will sample them. And that's what the sample is all about. You see, the sample is just a subset of what? The population. And here, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, is the same thing, except that when it's quantitative, we have different methods, and when it's qualitative, we have different techniques that we use to select them. So that's the sample, a subset of the population, and we have what we call the subject. So the subject is the single member of the sample. So the difference between the element and the subject is the element is a single member of the entire population, But after we have now selected the sample from the population, any member of the sample is what we call a subject. So try to understand, them. Let's say for all research proposal, you need to determine the population, your sampling frame, and the sample of your study. Only after having the population, you can calculate how many questionnaire or interview guide you need to disseminate and so on and so forth. This is one very important thing when it comes to every scientific inquiry or research that we do, especially when it involves primary data. If you forget to understand these ones and do it properly, then you are going to, suffer. So the next slide gives us an example of whatever we are talking about. So there's the relationship between the population, the sampling frame, and the sample. So your population is there, and out of this entire population, you can have a sampling frame, those that you think you can use for your study. And after you identify the sampling frame, then you can now have a sample out of this. And any member of this sample here is what we call a subject. Any member of this population here is what we call the element, and try to understand them. Okay. Okay, so now we have so many different ways that we can, use to determine the sample size. So it's a formula to determine the amount of samples. Once you have the population of your study, there's some way that you can determine how many samples that you need. Let me see if it's on the next slide. Other than that, I have to explain, further. It's not. So when we are doing quantitative study, then we have a table that we call Krejci and Morgan. So if you go to the Krejci and Morgan table, that will help you, okay, for the sake of you understanding things better. Let me just show you a trick when it is quantitative. So you just type Krejci and Morgan sample size table. So if I download any one of them here, which one? Let me see. So if this one is taking me to, okay, let me see, visit. Oh, somebody study. I just want a simple one that I don't need to go to, but it's still showing here, no problem. So it's a table for determining sample size of a known population. Listen carefully. If I know the population, then I can use the table. But in most instances, you don't know the population. If you don't know the population, you cannot go with the Krejci and Morgan. So you're saying number of the N is the population, and then S is the sample. If your population is 10, then you use all the 10. If it's 15, you use 14. Up to if your population is 1 million, then you just need only 384 of them. And that will be the true representation of the study that you are doing. So this simple table that you have here can help you determine your sample size if the population is known. If the population is not known, then we have other ways that we use to determine, the sample size. And over there, the analysis that you are going to perform will help you, but I don't want to go into detail. When it comes to the qualitative studies, that one is a straightforward one. Research has proven that by the time you reach interviewing the 12th person, you will reach saturation. Saturation means all the people that you are going to interview after the 12th person are going to say the same thing that is about what you have already identified. So most of the time, qualitative studies, we don't worry too much. I've seen some MPhils who use only 8 people, they interview 8 people and it's now 10 people. But these days we encourage students and say, okay, increase it to let's say 20, 25. So out for qualitative studies, we don't have much of a problem in determining the sample size and the rest. It's quantitative that sometimes we go through rigorous, techniques. So these are the types of sample selection. So how do we now get the sample? So we have 2 main types of the sampling, what we call the probability sampling and the non-probability sampling. For most quantitative studies, we prefer you go with the probability, sampling. But these days, it's so difficult, especially in this part of our world, that when you need data, people will not give you. So then we fall on the second one. So you say probability sampling means when all the elements in the population have an equal chance of being selected as sample, subjects. In other words, every member of the population that you choose is supposed to participate in the research. But you choose the person says, I'm not ready, because ethically, you can't force anybody. The person must give you consent and the person must agree to participate in the research. So if you have sampled the person, but the person says, I can't provide you with the data, there's nothing that you can do. And that's why probability sampling these days is so tough. It is such a simple random sampling. Simple random sampling means in a population in a certain room, you can just count them. So any third person, one, two, three, I pick, one, two, three, I pick, one, two, three, I pick. Then that is the simple random sampling. If you are sampling houses, that is easy because that's no human beings. So as for houses, you can say every third house in the community, we are sampling it for our study. If it's animals, that one too, they don't have anything. So you can just count and then you can select them, randomly pick them. So that one becomes simple and straightforward. But when it comes to human beings, it's so difficult. And that's what simple random sampling is supposed to be. Then we have the systematic sampling. So yeah, the simple random sampling is the one that you pick anyhow. The systematic sampling is the one I say one, two, three, I pick, one, two, three, I pick, one, two, three. That's systematic. Then we have the stratified random sampling. So stratified means now we are dividing them into certain groups. So we can now say, okay, for the university students, let's stratify them with three, what we call, each one of them, we call it the strata or stratum. I think stratum. Then if it's, plural, then we call it the strata. So let's stratify based on three different, classes. First, we study undergraduates, we study masters, and then we study PhDs. Then you see that we have divided the students into three classes, and that's where stratified sampling, can come in. Stratified random sampling can come in. Then we have the cluster sampling. Cluster is also the same thing. You are like more or less dividing them. But here, quite a thin line between the stratified and then the, cluster. Cluster can be, we are dividing, let's say, the university students into maybe their geographic, location and so on and so forth. So we can say, okay, Ghana is divided into three clusters. The northern part, the middle belt, and then the southern part. Then we can have three different classes. Area sampling, cluster sampling, more or less linked to each other. You can go and read about it as well. Then double sampling. So I sample and then I sample again. Then we call that one the double sampling. And that's what the probability sampling is supposed to be. And mostly when you are doing quantitative research, we expect you to do probability sampling. And the justification means probability sampling will reduce what we call biases. If you don't take care and you just go with the non-probability sampling, then you see that some people who are supposed to give you important data may not participate in the work. And those who are giving you may not be those that are the true representation of what you need. Then it can affect your results. And that's why we prefer the probability sampling a lot. But if the people are not ready, ethically they say they will not participate in the rest, there's nothing you can do. The non-probability sampling, you say when the elements do not have an equal chance of being selected as what subject. So here you are picking them per your convenience, those who are willing to provide the data. So examples here means convenience sampling, that is you go with survey, whoever is easily available, used for quick diagnosis of situations, simplest and cheapest and least reliable. So you see, people who are ready to give you the data is what you are sampling, and it can be very, very unreliable because those who have the data, important ones, may not participate in the study. Then we also go with purposive sampling. Purposive sampling is a situation whereby those that you are sampling can provide the data. For instance, I go and study a hospital. And in the hospital setting, depending on the phenomenon I'm investigating, only medical doctors can give me the results. The data I need. In that case, it's not everybody there that I can go and say, you work in the hospital, fill this questionnaire for me. So I have to target only the medical doctors. So here we talk about more or less the knowledge people that can give you the data. And that's where the purposive sampling comes in. So it's also called judgment sampling, snowball sampling, quota sampling, whatever. Snowball, for instance, is so difficult to identify those who can provide you the data. So one person feel and say, oh, do you have a colleague who can also help me? Then he or she will recommend another colleague and so on and so forth. And that's what the snowballing sampling can mean. Most of these things you were taught in your research method class, go and refer or revise on those. So you need to determine what type and what method of sample selection, you want to use. And it's very, very important. Once you identify your population and you know those you are going to collect the data from, the next thing that you do is to determine the size. And once you know the size, then you have to go with this, sampling thing, here. Say note, for each type that you choose, you must have some, reasons. You have to justify everything you do, and you justify with what literature, not from your own mind that I want to do this. And that's why anything you are doing, there's literature that should, support or help you to justify it. These ones in our, dispensation, most of the time we don't need it, but in a proper proposal writing, you have to provide the timelines. You see, kindly add a timeline in the form of a Gantt chart to your, proposal. So if you do that, fine, but most of the time we don't, add it. So you say, let us or the supervisor know when you are doing what, etc. And this should include the start of the thesis or long essay to when you are submitting for, marking. And that's what the timelines more or less is about. So that's it for the research proposal. And these are the references that was used, regarding it. So you can go and look for the book Newman, 2009, Understanding Research, and you can get a lot, from it. And the last one say plagiarism. Don't forget about the references. So every proposal that you are writing, the template that was given to you include, that one as well. So never ever, forget about the references. And at the MPhil MBA level, you don't write without supporting it with literature, especially at the MPhil level. Everything that you are doing there, you have to support it with a lot of, literature. So, in a nutshell, that's all about how you write the research, proposal. And I think it's time that I will pause now and then you come with your, questions. So,